Hello, and welcome to my channel. Today, we're going to be reacting to a video that I'm really excited about. I don't really know much about it, to be honest. In fact, I know nothing about it. The only thing I know about it is that it's by the guy that made The Fallen of World War II, Neil Halloran. I believe that's how you say his name. I'm very sorry if that's wrong. Let me know if that's wrong. Um, this was mentioned as like a sequel to The Fallen of World War II. It came up like halfway through the video saying, "Oh, watch the sequel." So I'm really looking forward to this because The Fallen of World War II was incredible. I did another video on this, which I think was actually my second ever video on this channel, which isn't saying much considering this is like the fourth ever video on this channel. But I just want to say, going off on a little tangent here, the response to that video has been amazing. Amazing to me. I sort of expected when putting it out there to kind of get a little bit of hate. I suppose that's kind of what you expect when you um post stuff on the internet. Um, so yeah, I wasn't really expecting too much from it. I kind of just wanted to share the experience that I was having with this. Um, but to be honest, I couldn't have, I couldn't have been more wrong. Um, First of all, the video is done really well. Like we're sitting at 200 views at the moment, which is like, oh my god, to me. And 7 comments, and every single comment on there is really lovely. Like I'm really grateful. Um, I've had someone like suggest like other videos. I've had someone else um like confirm something that I was talking about in that video about the gulags, and kind of just give me a little bit of background on like their exposure to it. Um, and that's just amazing to me. That's so nice. But yeah, I just wanted to say that like I was really pleasantly surprised by just how nice everyone's been so far. Anyway, yeah, so let's crack on. So today's video is Death Count in a Nuclear War, The Shadow Piece, Episode 1. This is 13 minutes 59 seconds. I'm really excited for this. Let's go.
Every second, on average, 4.6 people are born into the world. That's 140 million births a year. There are currently over 7 billion people alive today.
Okay, can I just say, this guy and like his animations, his videos, um, and like how he just explains stuff and how he visually explains stuff, I absolutely love it. This is like, I love this. I love it so much already. Um, yeah.
Humans are dying at less than half the rate we're being born. About 2 die every second, which is 60 million deaths a year. And the difference between the birth rate and the death rate tells us how fast the world's population is growing. We're gaining about 2.5 people per second, or 83 million a year. And as for those who are no longer living, the Population Reference Bureau came up with 108 billion for the total number of humans who have ever lived and died on Earth.
Oh wow. Okay.
They used 50,000 years ago as the start date for Homo sapiens. Now let's arrange the sand into groups of 1 million people. 7 billion is 7,000 millions. And then arrange the living by their age. Doing so creates what's called a population pyramid, though it's usually shown the other way around and separated by gender. We'll want to keep the
Hmm.
oldest sand on the bottom. We'll arrange the dead based on how long ago they died. The spike in deaths during World War II is visible even at this scale. Because it all happened in just 6 years, no other war we know of could leave such a dramatic scar on our living record.
Yeah, I think they said in World War Two. If you haven't seen the video, absolutely go watch it. Like, just stop watching this and go watch it because it's just so good. Um, I think they said in that I think it was around 60 million people were killed directly because of World War Two, which is about the same amount as people that would also die every year, like minus a war. So like, yeah, wow. I don't even know what I was trying the point I was trying to get to there. It's just like I thought that was just something interesting, how like the numbers are so close together there.
No wars so far. A nuclear war, especially one that erupted late in the Cold War, could have been much worse. You can pause to explore the stories behind these so-called close calls. Some were closer than others, but it's hard to know how close we came or how many people would have died. One way to study World War III casualties is to first look at what atomic weapons did to people in Japan in 1945, and then scale up. About a third of the population of both cities were killed. 90% of deaths occurred within the first 3 weeks. While long-term effects of radiation, such as cancer, killed thousands across decades, it accounted for a small portion of the victims.
That's the scariest part of like a nuclear bomb, and it's the fallout. It's like not the immediate death. That's it's horrible, but often I think personally I would I'd find that preferable to the radiation fallout afterwards. I don't know if any of you have seen Chernobyl, the TV show, and also the historical event. The TV show I think represents the kind of radiation poisoning and the effects of that really well. Um, and it's just horrifying. Like possibly like one of the worst. I think possibly since we're pinch of salt, 'cause obviously I don't know everything, but I think it's up there in terms of like the worst ways to go.
And on the other end, only a minority of those who died were killed instantly from the blast. Most deaths occurred between the first few hours and the first few weeks due to burns, blast injuries, collapsed structures, and radiation sickness. A broad term that describes a whole array of terrible symptoms, and a slow killer. Even those with high exposure didn't die for 5 to 6 days.
Sucks.
The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were small by today's standards. The hydrogen bombs developed years later have 10 times the radius of destruction. But it's not the size of the bombs that makes calculating World War III deaths so daunting. It's the number of warheads in play.
There's so many between like the US and Russia. I did not expect the UK to be included in this. Often it's not, 'cause it's quite a small country. So this is like wow, UK declassified in 2014. That's a lot more places than I would have thought actually for the UK. Sorry, because I've had this scenario in my head a few times. Because that's what you do. That's what the normal person does, right? Think about nuclear war these days. Because I live in the UK, obviously. I've often wondered like what would be the if there was a nuclear war and say like a nuclear missile was fired at the UK, where would it go? Like where would it hit? And in my mind, it's always London, the primary target. Um, and then to me, Manchester, because I'm from that area. Um, so I suppose I kind of see it. Maybe I'm a bit more biased towards that. I've always considered Cornwall, which is this part in the bottom left here, this like leg that comes off. I've always thought this would be quite a safe place. You kind of see it is in the middle, but I'm kind of surprised to see the amount of targets there that would be considered. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Anyway, sorry, let's continue. The amount of research that's like gone into
The death count for the first
to
3
this.
weeks of a nuclear war will depend on how many warheads launched and how many successfully hit their targets. If we went with a round number on the high end, let's look at what 500 million deaths would look like.
500 million.
Almost 10 World War IIs in 3 weeks. Then something would have occurred that didn't happen in Japan. Because the bombs would have been so much larger, and because many would have targeted underground missile silos, scientists believe the explosions would have propelled enough dust and ash into the atmosphere to block out much of the Earth's sunlight.
Turns into nuclear
The
winter.
radioactive fallout would have been deadly for a week or two, but the darkness and freezing temperatures could have decimated agriculture and food supplies for many years. We won't even see a guess at what a nuclear winter or nuclear famine would have done to the world's population. With so much uncertainty, most scientists won't even throw out a number. So we'll have to end our count there, at just 3 weeks into the nightmare.
That's horrifying. Just 3 weeks, and just look at it's hard again. Even with this like representation, I think you said that each square is that 1 million per square, 1 million people per square. But like that's absolutely mind-boggling. Yeah, every time I watch this guy's videos, which is twice, now, I was mind blown by just
Contrary
the
to a popular
sheer
notion,
numbers.
even a full-scale nuclear war is unlikely to wipe out the human race. As the number of
Really?
warheads increased during the arms race, so did the death count in a worst-case scenario.
Oh my god.
Since the Soviet Union collapsed, the number of bombs has been coming down. While there isn't a direct relationship between the number of warheads and the number of deaths, nuclear disarmament has reduced the potential human cost of a nuclear war in a very real way. But there are still enough bombs today to kill hundreds of millions of people, and more than enough to create the conditions of a nuclear winter. Today, there are 9 countries who have nuclear weapons. This number has not increased for decades. South Africa was once on the list, but they shut their program down.
Interesting.
The vast majority of countries in the world have decided not to go nuclear.
That's really reassuring, actually. I did not know that there was so few countries that had nuclear weapons. I wonder if part of that is like if there's been some threatening that's been going on, like oh, if you start developing nuclear weapons, then there'll be trouble or something like that. Yeah, that's quite comforting.
A
To
possible,
be fair,
partial explanation for this is that the United States and other countries have worked to keep this number down. Countries like North Korea and Iran get a lot of news coverage, but the US has also worked to disincentivize allies from getting the bomb, using such tools as the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and nuclear alliances. Under the rules of NATO, for example, the nuclear members provide deterrence for everyone else, which means, in theory, each country doesn't need its own bomb. The US provides similar protection to allies outside of NATO, including Japan, South Korea,
Oh,
and Australia.
did not know that they provided that to Japan. That's really interesting. Yeah, never would have expected that in like a million years.
In addition to disarmament and non-proliferation, there are other steps that may further reduce the risk of a nuclear war, such as a no-first-strike policy. Many of these ideas are controversial, and some may be unwise. You can pause to learn more about their pros and cons. Even without taking most of these steps, many foreign policy experts will say that the risk of a
Oh, I kind of thought that it was going to expand on them. So let's just have a look. So disarmament. Yeah, no first strike. Yeah, no launch on warning. I wonder what that means. Oh, that okay. So that means that don't launch nuclear weapons just off being warned, like being warned that we may attack you. De-alerting, non-proliferation, better accident safeguards, ban large tests. There's some really fascinating videos around the large tests that particularly Russia did. Around like I think it's the is it the Tsar bomber? Those are always really cool to see. And no underground silos. Okay, let's continue.
Even without taking most of these steps, many foreign policy experts will say that the risk of a full-scale war is less today than it was at the height of the Cold War, though it is certainly not at zero. Some believe the risk has grown. It certainly could grow if people become less scared of nuclear war and less steadfast in efforts to prevent it. Experts will also point out that improving relationships between countries is just as important, if not more so, than policies specific to nuclear weapons, which is important to consider when assessing something as complicated as NATO. There's no simple answer for achieving peace, but there is a simple hope. If we're clever enough to design such sophisticated weapons, we might also be clever enough to ensure we never use them. Now, our weapons are undeniably powerful. They dazzle us and remind us of our human potential. Instruments for preventing war are usually mundane, and if powerful, they tend to go unnoticed. If taking one of these steps prevented a catastrophe, we'd probably never know it. And that's what makes it so hard to prove what works in preventing war. But sometimes, when there's enough data available, you can see patterns emerge from the numbers. As an example, let's take a rare category of peacemaking that's actually tangible and exciting. Peacekeepers. Men and women who go into conflict areas to help prevent war from occurring or reoccurring. During the Cold War, the aim of peacekeepers was primarily to prevent a nuclear war. And after 1989, a new era in peacekeeping emerged. Missions became more focused on civil wars and more directly involved in the peace process. But does it work? Paige Fortna, a researcher at Columbia University, analyzed 94 cases after 1989, where there's a civil war followed by a spell of peace. Sometimes the fighting ended when one side defeated the other. Other ceasefires were more tenuous. And the peace that followed ranged from brief pauses in the fighting to decades of peace still holding today. In 36 of these cases, peacekeepers were present during the peaceful period. And they were not always successful. Sometimes war returned despite their efforts. Opponents point to these failures as evidence that peacekeeping does not work. and at a glance, it's not obvious that it does. Fortner ran statistical analysis to find out what factors predicted longer spans of peace. First, note that our findings on factors outside of peacekeeping were pretty consistent with other studies. You can pause to learn more.
Let's have a quick look at this. Oh, interesting. So this a very decisive victory, longer peace. I guess because like people know that they don't want to go up against a force that just had such an overwhelming victory. Treaty signed. That makes sense. Longer war, longer peace. Interesting. I suppose that kind of makes sense because it kind of like makes people not want to do that again. All right. Anyway, let's continue.
Fortner found that peacekeeping had a significant effect on the staying power of peace. War was about a quarter as likely to reoccur when peacekeepers were present. Even with the small sample size,
Okay.
she could claim with confidence that post-Cold War peacekeeping correlated with longer peace. Despite such findings, many policymakers remain unconvinced, and the general public, in the US anyway, shows little enthusiasm for supporting peacekeeping missions. While few would ever question the scientific methods used to develop our weapons, many are skeptical about statistics and the signs of less tangible things like peace. And such doubts help fuel the argument that the only real instruments of peace are instruments of war, that peace can only be achieved by fortifying borders, strengthening armies, and winning arms races. That nuclear weapons are the reason there has not been a major war since World War II. There's truth to many such theories. But I should tell you up front that this filmmaker believes in instruments of peace. That they are real, that they are powerful, and that you can see them working if you're willing to look at the numbers.
Oh, it's part 10, so I'll say what I was going to say in a second.
And in this series, we'll aim to bring peacemaking efforts into light with all the drama they deserve. To learn about future episodes and how you can support this audience-funded series, please visit my Patreon page linked here. And be sure to follow and share the series on social media. Thank you very much.
Just turn this down a little bit and let that roll. That's really cool. This video had a much more, to me it felt a lot more zen. Like the music was a lot more zen. And how it was, like all stars in the background and like nice sounds. For such a like horrifying subject. I really like the objective of this series though, which is to obviously bring more exposure to the instruments of peace. Mentioned over here how many people believe that the only way you can really have peace is by having a strong enough deterrent, effectively. So nuclear weapons is a big deterrent. Which I think obviously there's truth in that. There's truth in the sense of people aren't going to want to fight you as much. But I feel like there's other stuff to consider with instruments of peace. Maybe they'll cover it in future episodes. I genuinely believe though that I genuinely believe that a massive factor towards peace between countries at the moment is actually the internet. And whilst that sounds like a really weird thing to say, it's like why would the internet contribute to peace? I feel like before the internet, a lot of countries weren't really connected as they are now. Like I have a lot of friends that are from different countries, and I love to kind of learn about their countries from them and sort of see life through their eyes. And I feel like before you had the internet, before you had this access to actually truly learning about these people and speaking to these people from different countries, that you'd always kind of the only perception you had was of like the news, if the news happened to mention it, and the news is very often negative news. So you I suspect you likely got a very jaded view towards other countries when it was talked about in a negative light. Whereas now with the internet, obviously you have access to learning about that culture, speaking to people of that culture, learning their language, them learning your language, making friends, playing games, and you build like a really strong bond. And I feel like having a war between two countries, especially two countries that are kind of very present on the internet and interact, um, would be much harder now to actually get people to follow. The government could be like, "Yeah, we're going to war with them," but to actually get people to like the people to agree with that, I feel like would be much harder these days than it was those days, simply because it's not just another country isn't just a name anymore. It's people that you know. It's people that you like. It's people that you care about. Um, so yeah, I think the internet is something that's it's a personal opinion. There's no science behind that. There's no, I'm not. There's no facts behind that. It's just a personal opinion. I just think, yeah, the internet's played a massive role in peace between countries. Could be completely wrong there. I hope I'm not, because I like the idea of that being a reason why we've had such a long period of peace, is because people have been able to speak to each other and being able to actually, skip the media, skip all this sort of stuff, and just actually like, interact and learn that everyone's human, everyone's the same, just born in a different place, grew up with a different language, um, or religion or something like that. Anyway, rambling now. This was a really cool video. Um, like I said, it was a lot more zen this time. It was a lot. It felt a lot more relaxed compared to the Fallen of World War Two, and I think that's on purpose. It's quite relaxing sounds in there and the stars and things. Really good. I really love these videos. I love how he explains stuff. He's really good at explaining things. And I love the visual representations of everything. I think that just is, yeah, I love it. Anyway, I'm gonna end it there before this ends up being a really long video again. Thank you for watching if you did. If you do have any suggestions for any videos that you'd like me to check out, please do let me know. And if there's anything in here that I've mentioned, anything that I've talked about, um, or say if you disagree with anything I said, let me know in the comments. I'd be really interested to find out. Um, so if you disagree with my opinion about the internet, let me know. Or if you agree, that would be nice too. Anyway, I'm gonna end it there. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.